Hey everybody, we're talking about cultivating the mystical heart. And you could look at this from a lot of different perspectives. When we go through and we do angel work, part of what we're doing is we're making ourselves conductive to angels and trying to bring in that energy. But our ability to bring in the angels, for one, is tied to conductivity and the refinement of our energy body. But if you were to use different verbiage, part of what you would say is you're you're refining the nervous system and its ability to hold light, or the light within the nervous system. Then you look at it from the point of view of meditation, and you do things like Kundalini practices where you are circulating energy and moving energy up from the lower centers up to the higher centers. And in doing the Kundalini practice, again, you're refining the nervous system so that it refines the emotional body, it refines the mental body, and it refines intuition and your ability to perceive. And what we're doing here is we're doing the opposite. We're refining the nervous system so that angel work is stronger, or doing meditation and Kundalini practices are much stronger, right? Your prayer life or your meditation life becomes much more potent. It doesn't take as much practice for the meditation to hold. Then we look at it from the point of view of psychological healing. A lot of times when we look at, we get stressed out, we get triggered, we have old traumas, we have conditioning from the past, we have anxiety, we have fears that are very deep seated in our body. Even the idea of homeostatic or low emotions, really those are a byproduct of how the nervous system is functioning. And if we keep going through and doing all these practices specifically to the anxiety and to the different areas that we just mentioned, you're trying to refine the nervous system, where here we're going to the nervous system first. We're refining the nervous system. We're breaking up the trauma loops. We're refining the effects of trauma on the nervous system. Our mind and our emotions, we have the story of the trauma, but the nervous system just sees it as a thing that happened and a thing that it needed to get through. It doesn't see the story. It had to make an adjustment, and it creates this loop. And so that's why a lot of times we get triggered, or we have behaviors that we don't really realize what's happening in the moment, but afterwards it's what just happened, right? You engaged a loop. We have them inside of us, we have them in our mind, and we have these kind of loops that are associated with external interactions or social interactions. So, a deeper form of psychological healing is to systematically go through and refine these aspects of the nervous system and bring a sense of balance to these aspects of the nervous system. We talk about the autonomic nervous system, which is fight, flight, and rest and repair quite often, but we don't talk about the other pieces of the nervous system. Here, we're going through the whole nervous system piece by piece by piece. Like, you wouldn't think of the nervous system that's associated in the gut, known as the enteric nerves, as being anything more than a set of nerves that handles our digestive processes. But when these are out of balance, it increases the potential for duplication of viruses and the spread of bacterias. And also, mystically or esoterically, it's an aspect, a very big aspect of how we process karmic imagery and how the karma begins to manifest. So when we look at these aspects of the nervous system, here we're talking about angels, meditation, psychological healing, be it mental or emotional, even social healing, how we interact with other people, how we interact with the environment. So that's a piece. But then we come to physical healing. When we have arthritis, when we have back pain, when we have these conditions that maybe are chronic, or we're not really healing at the rate that we'd like to, or that the body has the potential of doing. A lot of this is tied to glitches or loops within the nervous system. So we're not just looking at the nervous system, but we're also going to pieces of the brain, one being the basal ganglia, which is tied to uh, postural distortions in the body, like, how we have misalignments in the body, things of this nature. But it also makes the mind become very repetitive and makes behaviors become very compulsive when there's issues there. And be it through injury or illness, um, sometimes, like if you have anemia, or B12 deficiency, magnesium deficiency, can throw off this basal ganglia to where it causes issues, right? Then we have parts of the nervous system like the amygdala and the neocortex, which have to do with the irrational part of our mind and emotions, and then also the rational part, where we might become so rational that we become internally rigid, right? We want to be able to go with flow of life, and we don't want to be triggered at every little thing that comes along. And so we're exploring these different aspects. And one of the great ways that the body can eventually break out of these loops is the activation of the heart. And we go through and we look at it from a neurological point of view. If you look at a lot of spiritual practices, they do things to stimulate the heart, activate the heart, meditation, breathing practices, energy healing. All of these things contribute, but the nervous system is one of the biggest contributors to the activation of the heart. And then the reverse, right? The heart becoming more activated actually helps us to break out of these neurological loops. So it kind of becomes this thing about which was first, the chicken or the egg. And if you're only working a piece of something, you get some results, but you don't get the maximum results. We want to go through and be able to unwind these things to a certain degree in a way that's soothing and stable, and not, where we have to relive all these things from our past. And, going through and doing this, it helps the physical body heal all these different conditions. It helps the body sleep. You know, um, I notice that my body responds better to treatment with other things, essential oils or tinctures, when I'm treating like pain or shoulder pain or back pain. But as silly as this is, as I get older, in the middle of the night, got to make more trips to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And, doing this process, I notice I'm not making those trips to the bathroom. Instead of 3 or 4 times, I'm only maybe doing it once, or sometimes not at all. And so all of these things are tied to our neurological processes. And so we're going to deeply activate the heart so that we can turn inward to a much greater degree. But also, we're going to accelerate the body's ability to heal. We're going to treat psychological conditions, but from the inside out. More of what causes us to get triggered, and what causes us to get upset, and what causes us to have repetitive thinking, not because of some story or some past event, but because of what has happened to the nervous system itself. We're releasing the traumatic loops from the body. And then it improves our spiritual practice, and it improves our ability to work with angels. And so all of these things kind of come together to produce a much deeper effect. So I hope you can join us.